Hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe, and I'm here to break down the Saints draft class for 2023. Draft is finally over. We have our haul of players, and now I'm going to break the whole thing down to you. So I've broken down every day of the draft. Go back and see the videos I've made each day, video per day, and now this is the complete draft breakdown. So I give the Saints an overall grade of B plus. I think what they did was very, very good. Can't really complain about it. We met a lot of needs. We got a lot of interesting players. And of course, the Saints brass know more about these guys than we do. We're all playing quarterback, armchair quarterback, right? And we can only do so much. I can see the guy on film. I can read his measurables. I can read the reports about him. Oh boy, meeting these people face to face really do tell you something. You know, quite honestly, I've seen the interviews of all of these draft picks, and a couple of them weren't impressive to me. I can see why certain people slipped. I can see why certain people were reached for. So, overall, B plus, like it. So, where are my issues with it? Like I say, you can't really complain. They know more than we do. But I love lists, and so let's break it down. The first pick was defensive tackle Bryan Bresee. Bryan Bresee was the best available pass rushing defensive tackle on the board. That's something we needed. I believe that the Saints coaching staff felt like Bresee was way ahead of anyone else that was there on the board. At the time, as far as pass rushing defensive tackles go, I believe Gervon Dexter was still available out of Florida, and he's got a connection with Mark Grantham, or Todd Grantham. Mark Grantham is my brother-in-law. Todd Grantham is a new Saints defensive coach that was in Florida before. I thought because of the connection, we might put an emphasis on Dexter. Well, maybe Grantham felt like Dexter wasn't the way to go. You know, we drafted Bresee at pick 29, so he must have been head and shoulders above everybody else that was there on the board. You also had Keanu Benton out of, I believe, Wisconsin, who was a defensive tackle we could have considered in the second round. So I was a little cold on Bresee as a player. There were several mocks I did where if Bresee was available at pick 29, that I would decide just to trade back into the second round. Not far, 4 picks, maybe 6 picks, and pick up an extra pick or two along the way. Well, the Saints brass was sold on Bresee, and that's their prerogative, and hopefully they made the best decision for this franchise. But in order to play devil's advocate, let's pull up the list of players that were there when we picked Bresee at 29. So this is a smaller list than what I presented in the other video. But these are players that I would have gladly taken with a late first, early second round pick. Not all of these players would have fit an immediate need. Joey Porter Jr., sitting there at the top of the list, was somebody that I don't think we needed. But he was definitely worth a late first, early second round pick. You also had Michael Mayer, the tight end. You had Steve Avila still there at guard, along with Osiris Torrance. And you had 2 really good wide receivers in Jonathan Mingo and Cedric Tillman. You had a couple of the best linebackers still available. You had some great defensive linemen still on the board. And you also had tight end Luke Musgrave, which was there along with Michael Mayer. So I look at this list, and I think the selection of Bresee at 29 was the best, safest route to go. We could have traded back out of the first round. You know, the last 2 picks after Bresee were Nolan Smith and Felix Anaduke, no, what's his name? Uzuma, right. So those are the 2 picks in the first round that went, and these were the players that were left. If either one of those teams would have taken Bryan Bresee, then, we'd be out a player. But these are 16 players here. I feel like we could have traded back maybe 4 or 6 picks, picked up an extra 3rd-round pick along the way. And then on day 2, we would have had, about 6 of these go before we picked. I think Isaiah Foskey would have been a good 1st-round pick. We get him in the 2nd round at pick 40. I just feel like this is a nice little list. If you don't get Bresee, you would have at least gotten 2 more of these guys. Foskey, probably, since we got him at 40. And then one of these other guys we could have gotten if we'd have traded back. So that was an option, but I can't really complain. Bresee was taken. It was a player of need, even though I wasn't that high on him. Like I say, they know more than we do. Bresee's our player. Not going to regret it too much. I give the pick an A-. And, trading back would have been risky, but we would have probably picked up an extra 3rd-round pick if we would have done it. All right. My next critique, not going to critique the pick of Isaiah Foskey, my favorite pick in the draft. It's a real close between he and A.T. Perry. Let's go on. And we'll focus on that in a minute. The 3rd round comes up, and we get Kendre Miller. Of course, at the time, I didn't know about the Tyjae Spears injury thing. I was hoping it was Spears. We go with Kendre Miller. I'm fine. We needed a running back. I think the priority of running back was just as important as wide receiver or linebacker. So, we go ahead and take one. Like I say, if we don't collect extra picks, we're going to have to miss out on something. A tight end, a wide receiver, a running back. We're going to miss out on something. We pull the trigger on the running back. Now, if Kendre Miller turns out to be a good number 3 back and an eventual starter, hey, it's a home run. But here's the list of players that were available when we did draft Kendre Miller. Now, we picked Miller at pick 13, at 17, round 3, pick 17. And like I say, if we would have traded back in the 1st round a few picks, we would have probably picked up an extra 3rd, maybe an extra 4th, but maybe an extra 3rd. And then you're looking at 2 players on this list instead of 1 that we could have gotten. So we get Kendre Miller at 17, and we don't have an extra 3rd-round pick. Well, at 17, you also had Tyjae Spears still on the board, as well as Devin Achane. They like Miller better. That's not an option for them, so they weren't going to trade out of that pick. But I think Trenton Simpson was the player here. Baltimore ends up getting him later on in the 3rd round. I think Baltimore knows a thing or two about linebackers. I think with the positions that were there, Tucker Kraft and Darnell Washington at tight end, Cedric Tillman still on the board at wide receiver, not to mention Jalen Hyatt and also Michael Wilson with Stanford, and a bunch of other really good players after that at wide receiver. You still had offensive linemen available. We know that they ended up drafting Nick Saldiveri, but DeJuan Jones and Chandler Zavala was still there. You also had Wanya Morris. And, the Trenton Simpson was my linebacker of choice. You still had DeMarvion Overshawn, which I think he would have been good for the Saints. And Dorian Williams, I think, could have made a spot for the Saints. Of course, I have to mention Zach Harrison. I could have sworn we were drafting that guy. I think he ends up going to either Atlanta or Carolina, so we'll get to see how he turns out. Would have never taken him in the first 2 rounds. And Sayaki Iko was still on the board here when we got the running back. So just a little list to show you, if we would have picked up an extra 3rd-round pick, we could have had 2 of these guys. We pulled the trigger on Miller. I can't complain about the pick, though I was looking at Tyjae Spears at that point. Now that I know about the injury, I'm glad we went with another direction, but Trenton Simpson was, I think, the pick at this point. That's what I'm leaning towards. And just looking at everyone that's there, if we would have picked up an extra 3rd. So there we are with that. And then the last list I'm going to pull up is the list of players that were available in the fourth round. So we traded up from pick 120 to 103, and we get our guy, or I'm sorry, pick 115 to 103 in the fourth round. First pick in the fourth round, we get our guy in Nick Saldiveri. And I'm glad we got him. He's one of my favorite offensive linemen in the draft. Excellent selection, though we move up to get him. That was our guy. And, there was a bit of a run on offensive linemen in the fourth round. So, obviously, the Saints liked Saldiveri more than any of these other guys. DeJuan Jones, late first-round talent, still sitting on the board. Chandler Zavala, Blake Freeland, Braden Daniels. You had Jalen Duncan, of course, Nick Saldiveri, who we ended up picking. You had Sidy Sow sitting there on the offensive line as well. And lots of cornerbacks and safeties to choose from. We end up going with Jordan Howden in the fifth round. But if we would have traded back in the first round, and we wouldn't have got an extra third round, we would have got an extra fourth round. Same thing with, whether we would have traded back a little bit in the second round. I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad we got Foskey. We could have traded back here a little bit. Still got a running back and still got an extra pick in the fourth round. If we would have traded back in the third round, trading back is something the Saints don't do. I love lists, though, and I like to show you who was on the board when these players were made. So to trade back at any point in the first three rounds, we could have had an extra third, definitely an extra fourth. So instead of getting just Nick Saldiveri here, we could have picked up another one of these guys. And when you look at this list, we ended up picking up an extra one of these guys. Jake Haener sitting there. And we traded back into the fourth round to get Haener. He was one of my favorite quarterbacks in the draft. I'm glad we got him. Hate that we had to trade back into the fourth round to do it. We could have had an extra fourth round pick if we trade back. And maybe the Saints will start to figure this stuff out. But these guys like to go with who they like. So I've heard some people say the draft was a little safe. That Bryan Bresee pick was safe. So, when the Saints fall in love with someone and they go up and get them, like we did here in the fourth round with Nick Saldiveri, you really hope that player pans out. It's not like 2 first-round picks for Davenport. It's a fourth-round pick for another fourth-round pick, and a fifth or a seventh or something like that. So I'm fine with it, especially if the guy makes it. But looking at this list in the fourth round, a lot of great players. I had my eye on Josh Whyle. I thought for sure we'd go with either that direction or Zach Kuntz for tight end. I thought they were in love with Jacorian Bennett. Would not have shocked me if that would have been the pick. And I loved A.T. Perry, and we ended up getting him in the sixth round. So there you go. That's lists. I love lists. Gave you some lists. And so all together, I say the Bresee pick was safe. If he turns out to be a great player, okay, great. Kendre Miller was a selection you could have made. Lots of options there. Moving up in the fourth round to get a quarterback and an offensive lineman. If you'd have traded back a few spots, you could have still filled some roster spots. You wouldn't have had to trade anything away to move up back into rounds and stuff like that. That also with the pick of Jordan Howden, who was a relative unknown to me in the fifth round. The Saints know DBs. When they got Alontae Taylor last year in the second round, I had a fourth round grade on him. Shows you what I know. Shows you what the league knows. Everyone thought it was a reach. Even the NFL pundits were saying it was a reach in the second round. And Alontae Taylor turned out to be an excellent rookie. So they know better than me, and Jordan Howden might turn out to be a great player. A.T. Perry. So I think the best 2 picks in the draft. Our second round pick, defensive end Isaiah Foskey. Great pick. My favorite of the draft. I got to say, just a little better than the A.T. Perry pick. But I will say this. Foskey reminds me of Davenport, except he's got skins on the wall. to prove that he can be productive. Davenport didn't do much in college either. So if you get a guy that's has the same attributes as Davenport, except he's the sack leader at his school, like Foskey is at Notre Dame, it's a totally different thing. And you're not giving up 2 first-rounders for him. I love getting Foskey. That was the pick that got me excited. The next exciting pick was getting A.T. Perry in the 6th round. A.T. Perry, he is one of my favorite receivers, but I never met the guy. Didn't know he had 17 drops, but when you're targeted 250 times, dropping 17 balls, puts it a little more in perspective. He's got the size. If he adds 20 more pounds, he's going to be another Mike Thomas frame-wise. And he's pretty fast for a big guy. And he makes some pretty good catches. Now, if he goes and drops 1 out of every 10, we target him 7 to 10 times a game, then we'll be watching him drop a ball every other game. But if we see him catching passes on the sideline and making excellent catches throughout the season, I can forgive a drop every now and then. But watching his interview, it gave me reservation. He said he thought the reason why he fell was because of rumors of him having a bad attitude. And the Saints checked in on that. All the coaches said they don't know what anyone's talking about. His players in school and associates say they don't know what people are talking about. A.T. Perry is a quiet guy. He doesn't have an attitude. But just watching him in the interview, it looked like he had a bad attitude. I don't know. Maybe he was so bummed out about getting drafted so late that he couldn't put a smile on his face. But I don't think he smiled once in the interview. He seemed really bitter. And, I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but I was in love with the player. And then when I heard him talk, I'm like, I feel like you do have an attitude. Everybody else says you don't. And hopefully you're a good team player. And hopefully that attitude comes out on the field, as in you're a player and you're going to get it. And you're going to make everybody in this team happy. Everybody in the fan base happy. But it's your interview, man. It's your first interview. You said you were grateful, I guess. I don't know. You just looked really mean. Like, I watched the interview with Isaiah Foskey, and as soon as the guy started talking, I lit up. By the time he said his second or third sentence, I was sold. Some people just have a good attitude, and they project that kind of lightness, and I was sold. Foskey, you're a captain already. You've got me wanting to go play. And I'm watching A.T. Perry's interview, and I'm like, man, you look like you have a bad attitude, man. I've never met you. And everybody that knows you says you don't. But you dropped to the 6th round. So he is my second favorite pick of the draft. And would have probably been my favorite pick had that interview gone different. That's just me. I hate to complain. I am. This is me talking a lot about the Saints. You guys let me know what you think. Overall grade of B+. I like it. I really love the pick of Foskey. And I think Jake Haener he's going to be a good quarterback in this system. Now, whether he turns out to be Chase Daniel and he's just a really good backup that we can count on every now and then, and he stays with us as a backup for the next 5 years, fine. But I think there's some potential there. I expect to see Haener play in preseason, and I expect him to complete a lot of balls. He's going to complete over 60% of his passes in preseason. And I expect the offense to be run like a well-oiled machine. And it's going to be exciting. If Haener blows up in preseason, we won't be able to put him on the practice squad. So carrying 3 quarterbacks on the active roster is not something the Saints like to do, especially with Taysom Hill as a good emergency third quarterback. So will Haener beat out Jameis Winston for that backup spot, or will we carry 3 quarterbacks, technically 4? Or will we take a chance and put Haener on the practice squad for somebody else to swoop in and grab? Those are things to look at. We also trade away Adam Troutman, so we're going to need to address tight end. I am going to do a video next. Please subscribe to Rosenfield 10 so you can get that video, breaking down the 11 rookie undrafted free agents that we acquired. And we're going to bust out the roster for the Saints and show you how it looks with all these new guys on the team. So do that. Subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button. And we'll be talking about the rest of the draft in the next video. We'll show you the roster. And we can all tell our new guys welcome and who dat.